Did you learn something? Is this on? Good, good, good. Praise is due to Allah. Um, Again, some of you have been able to get through that traffic. We spoke earlier we had to push it back some because of the country western concert going on, and it has really backed up traffic. But there are still people making their way here today. If you didn't know, each year the Nation of Islam celebrates the anniversary of the Million Man March. And this year's celebration in October, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan will be bringing the entire nation to the city of Philadelphia. And so Farrakhan is coming to town. All praises due to Allah. We look forward to that. We have a lot of work in front of us. We really want to thank the presenters from last night. Who was here last night? All praises due to Allah. I mean, I really want to thank Sister Elizabeth Shabazz, the wife of Minister Jeremiah Shabazz, and the wonderful things that she shared. I mean, if nothing else, this is the only time, if you really have embraced the life-giving message of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, this is the only time you're going to get the love like this. And I beseech us not to blow it and let yourself get in a negative frame of mind when something so positive has come to black people after 400 years. And that if I don't remember anything else she said, that's important. But we thank her for the things that she shared. She was one of the ones to help the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in being a caretaker for his mother when they were in Georgia also. But that was just a lot of history. You can get that on the tape. Though we improvised and brought him in, Brother Ali Salahuddin, now of the Desert Club, he was Minister Philip in the West Philadelphia Mosque there on 41st and Haverford. And he was just fantastic last night, sharing with us how Philly really got the name Top of the Clock, and how it was #1 in the Nation of Islam in productivity, and the real work that took place and the way Minister Jeremiah Shabazz organized the city so that Philadelphia would soar to the top. And of course, Sister Indazar Sharif, I mean, the way she was sharing about the nation, I said, where did I join? Did I stop at the last house on the left? Because, I mean, that was positive. But inshallah, you'll hear from her again and what the MGT of Philadelphia did, you know, going from a goal of $5,000 to the Messenger of Allah to 15,000 to 30,000. But ultimately, the sisters right in the city of Philadelphia produced $100,000 cash money to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I have an old writing of the messenger thanking the MGT for the great support that they gave to him, and he said that they understand that if a leader is to be a good leader, he must be exposed abroad. And with the kind of resources that came into the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he was able to travel abroad and experience other people, other cultures, and other leaders on the planet. Brother Omar Kareem did a stellar job last night moderating and just sketching a lot of the things that the Muslims did in the city of Philadelphia. As Indasar Sharif said when she came on the post, her first assignment from Minister Jeremiah was that he wanted a united temple. He didn't want the brothers and sisters separated. And as a community of men and women working together, Brother Omar began to lay out the kind of things that were done, where nearly whole blocks were purchased by the believers, and the number of business establishments that opened. And so you can get all that on the tape of last night. It was a very exciting night. We thank all of those presenters that provided us with the good time that we had last night. Also, there are books available. You'll see Minister Abdul Rahman is outside with his book. We'll hear from him today. And the book Top of the Clock that takes us into an extensive interview of Minister Jeremiah Shabazz and others that labored with him in the city of Philadelphia. You can get that book outside also. As I said last night, one of the parties that we would have loved to have had here to share with us, but right now his condition would not allow him to be here, was the other son of thunder in Mosque 27, who was known as John Shabazz, Minister Abdullah Muhammad, one of the great giants of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and the builder, one of the principal builders there of the West Coast. And if you've been following Minister Louis Farrakhan, you'll know that he said that the Savior would not allow the messenger to build on the West Coast until a certain time. But when he did go, he said the West Coast took off, and in a short period of time, it caught up with the rest of the nation in productivity and began to soar even beyond it in many ways. But it would have been a real treat for you to have had Minister Abdullah Muhammad here. He's a walking encyclopedia, and those that read the writings of Brother Jabril Muhammad, who was Bernard Kashmir then, you should understand that many times that Jabril was sitting with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Minister Abdullah was right there as the regional minister for the West Coast. He has a treasure trove of information that I hope to get my hands on some of it if I can just get a Xerox copy. But it's tremendous. We want to get ready to hear now from people that have come in town to share with us a lot of the history. And you know that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that history is most attractive and best qualified to reward our research. History serves as a guide for us. As I said last night, if we know who we were, we know who we are. If we know what we did, we know what the possibilities are. Learning what we were able to do should serve as a springboard for us and a good motivation for us to want to be able to do something like that and even build on that and go beyond. The great works that many of the believers did throughout the country is enormous. Now, last night we sort of focused in on the history of the Nation of Islam, particularly in the city of Philadelphia. And we saw that the phenomenal way that Philly grew under the leadership of Minister Jeremiah Shabazz, their local minister at that time. You know, three things that we know about Minister Jeremiah. He recognized talent, he positioned talent, then he drove people beyond the limits that they thought they had. Those were the kind of things that I remember as each person got up to talk about Minister Jeremiah Shabazz last night. Certainly a man who loved the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I was humbled with the rare privilege to sit before him and learn a lot about the history of Islam here in the city of Philadelphia. We should know, as this book comes out now, there are many books about Malcolm X. There are books about the Nation of Islam that characterize us, certainly under a dim light. But this recent book will make you think that the nation wasn't doing nothing until Malcolm X joined. We should be aware that even before July 4th, 1930, which is the day we are told that Master Farad Muhammad stood to declare our independence, he had already been coming in and out of America for at least 20 years. We don't know all of what he was doing in that 20-year period, but I believe we're starting to learn some things. Just recently, papers have surfaced that were in an attic in Detroit, and we're learning something more about this great man. They call him a mysterious man. You know, they have a special unit that finds missing persons. But these special units that the dominant, the rulers of the current civilization have, they've been unable to find this man, Farad Muhammad. They don't have a grave site for him, and they haven't been able to find him. That's interesting. But according to the Detroit Free Press, there were only about 250,000 black people living in the city of Detroit during this early period of 1930 to about 1933. But yet, we know that Farad Muhammad named at least 25,000 people. And of the 25,000, none of them were Malcolm X at that time. We do know that the mosque in Detroit alone has records verifying that we had over 8,000 registered believers just in that one temple, long before Malcolm X came to the Nation of Islam. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was commissioned by what the Caucasians call this mysterious man, who they say disappeared in 1934. And with this commission, it brought great trouble to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, even that some wanted to take his life. We understood that at least from 1935 to 1942, not when the FBI caught the Honorable Elijah Muhammad hiding under a bed. That never happened. He contacted his attorney and went and turned himself into the FBI. That's the truth of it. And answered every question that they asked him, didn't plead the fifth or anything. But from 35 to about 1942, when he did this, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was known to have been in this city, in Chester, Pennsylvania, throughout Philadelphia, northern Jersey, and he was planting seeds over this period of time. These seeds were harvested by the man called Malcolm X. Once he was sent to the East Coast, you know, people have you thinking that there was no Islam on the East Coast until Malcolm came. But Malcolm was able to harvest seeds that were planted early on by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad as he began to work, starting in Philadelphia and ultimately going to New York City. But I'm only giving you a brief sketch. We put this conference on with the thought in mind of bringing people who lived this history, not people who went and researched it. Their life is a research, if you will. And so it brings me great pleasure to bring on our next presenter who has come in. I haven't known anyone that's known more history about the Nation of Islam than this person. And I'll say this, that I've learned a lot from the Honorable Louis Farrakhan as a laborer. But before I was a laborer, I was just a private soldier in the ranks. And when I was a private soldier in the ranks, though Minister Farrakhan was my mosque minister, it was the assistant minister that I learned a lot about mosque life from. And I didn't even know we had problems in the mosque. I heard this brother. So, but he knew how to identify problems, and he knew how to get to problems quick and bring the mosque back on track to the real program and the purpose for the mosque being open in the first place. So I want you to put your hands together to welcome our international representative to the Honorable Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam now, our own minister. This is the one that taught me about geography, maps, the world, and everything. I don't know of anybody that's traveled to more countries than he's traveled to. He probably could name every capital on the planet. Put your hands together for Minister Abdul Akbar Muhammad.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I bear witness there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God. I greet you in peace. Assalamu alaikum. First and foremost, I want to thank Allah for blessing me to be here this afternoon, and I want to thank the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. I just had an excellent conversation with him, and I was telling him, he sends you the greetings, Brother Minister Rodney. I was just telling him who was here, but we were going over Atlanta last night. And I went to Atlanta to speak about my challenge in the country of Guyana in South America. And I always have to say Guyana, South America, because across the country they get Guyana confused with Ghana. Ghana is in West Africa, Guyana is in South America. And tomorrow, inshallah, at the mosque in Philly, I'm going to walk through what happened to me so that you would know. And then I want to ask you to help me with letters. I told Brother Askia that only an apology from the office of the president of Guyana will have any traction. And if the CID, the equal of their FBI, if they apologize, it would be one little line in a corner of a paper on page 36. That's right. But if the president apologized, then that's news. And the expertise of brothers like Askia Muhammad with the same fervor that they put out that I was arrested for terrorist activity and drug trafficking. That's what they came to my hotel room. Now, some of you looking at me like you don't know anything about it. Either you didn't read the final call or you weren't looking at CNN. So, but I'm going to talk about it, inshallah, tomorrow at the mosque. But today we want to talk a little about history. And I want to start off with something that took place 10 years ago when I was, thank you, brother, when I was traveling around the country, really raising funds for the Ghana mission. And we have so much potential overseas, it's unbelievable. The number one country, I would say, on the African continent that the Nation of Islam has the greatest potential is South Africa. Their circumstances, their condition is identical to ours. And even though the Indian Muslims tried to penetrate and teach Islam, because it's Indian Muslims there who came to South Africa as indentured servants. Mahatma Gandhi lived in South Africa. Many of you may know that. But they tried, especially with the Zulus, but they couldn't click. The brothers kind of liked what they heard about Islam, but they always perceived it as an Indian religion. But when we were down there, and it started with Dr. Khalid Muhammad. He went there first, and when I got to South Africa on my first trip in '94, right after independence, Khalid's name still resonated because of what he taught of the Nation of Islam and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So, but I would come back from Africa. I moved to Ghana in 1990. And the story goes, and I'm just going to briefly say what happened. The minister was doing his tour of Africa. And most of you, and if you're younger in the nation, this is an important part of history. And yes, I know, Askia, you're right. My daughter last night, my oldest daughter at the Atlanta Mosque stood up. We were having questions. She raised her hand. I avoided her for a long time because I didn't know what she was going to ask. But she got up, instead of directing a question to me, she turned to the audience and pleaded with them to put pressure on me to stop traveling so much, especially after this last incident, and sit down and write my book. And she said, and I hope y'all would join me in pressuring Akbar to do it. But let me say this. we were traveling, the minister in '86, we did a tour of the Arab world. We went to see Brother Gaddafi in '85, and he told the minister, why don't you tour the Arab world? And Gaddafi used his influence to open doors in mostly all of the Arab countries. We left Tripoli. The first place we went was to Saudi Arabia to make Umrah. I asked Allah to bless us. We went to Mecca, and then we went to Syria, and then we went to the Sudan, and we went to a few other countries. We went around the Arab world, and then the next year, the minister wanted to make a tour of some African countries, and we started with Nigeria. But Dr. Khalid and I, this was '86, in the early part of '86, or '85, the end of '85, we went to London to rent Prince Albert Hall so that the minister could speak. And what the British Home Secretary did is he banned the minister. And we couldn't go to London. So we're on our way to Nigeria. We took TWA from Chicago. It had to be 25 of us about. And we flew from TWA, O'Hare to London, Heathrow Airport. And we were getting off the plane, we saw all of this press, and we figured that they were out there because the minister was coming, and it was like a welcoming. The press wanted to talk to him. But really, they were there to witness the arrest of the minister, and they detained us in London, and the minister had to sit in the room for 14 hours. Then we flew to Nigeria. And in Nigeria, they had already spread the rumor that we were communists coming to create a problem for Nigeria because Nigeria was about to join the OIC. And so after we had rented a hall and worked things out, the president of the country banned the meeting and stopped it. And so we couldn't have the meeting after we had spent a lot of money and with the help of the Libyan brothers. So we had to leave there, and the minister was going to go to Senegal next. And so Lou Myers, I was back in America, and Lou Myers and I were going to meet the minister in Senegal. We go to Senegal, and I'm in customs, and I'm saying, did a delegation of 23 people led by Minister Farrakhan come through here? And the custom person said, are you with Louis Farrakhan? I said, yes. They said, come this way. So they arrested Lou Myers and myself, and they had a trap set there for the minister. So finally we get to Ghana. Instead of the minister coming to Senegal, we went to Ghana, and President Rawlins, at that time he was the chairman of the PNDC, he had heard the same thing. But he said that when they say, and he got it from the American intelligence, that Farrakhan was a troublemaker. So Rawlins is a kind of fiercely independent individual. So he said, when they say A, I go to Z. That's Z, the way they pronounce it, like the British. So he said he wanted to look at the minister and listen to him. So he let the minister speak. And after we were there for 13 days. And after he heard the minister, he went and talked to his military, let the minister address his military, which is unusual. And he said that they said many things about him, but I only found in him a noble son of Africa. So we're getting ready to leave. Now we're sitting in the room, it's Lou Myers, Khaled, myself, the president, and the minister. And the president said, Brother Farrakhan, do you have an office in Africa? He said, no. He said, why don't you open up one right here in Ghana? And the minister said, Mr. President or Chairman, I'll do that. And he said, matter of fact, I'd like to send Khaled. And Dr. Khaled is good, and so forth, a good historian. And so the minister and the president agreed. And then what happened was Khaled gets back to America, and everybody knows his difficulty. And, when history, you have to be true to history. Brother, could they put that original screen that you started off at the beginning could you put that up? You have to be true to history. Khaled, even though the internal contradictions that developed, Khaled helped this nation. And in the early days when we didn't have nobody, that's right. He was that's why I was on the rostrum sweating so much. I thought the minister was going to say, here's an example of what I was talking about, guns. I told them not to have no guns, and Akbar and Khaled, they armed to the T. So I said, Brother Minister, please don't go to that. But he spared me, okay? So, but you have to be true to history. And I want to say this because Khaled was going to go to Africa. But Allah is the best know. He got in that difficulty. He had to go to jail. So the minister, I was traveling in Africa, the 80th birthday of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. I'm going to talk fast because I want to get to where we are today. And so President Rawlins sent an invitation to me through one of his aides. Can Farrakhan come on September the 21st, 1989? It's the 80th birthday anniversary of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, and delivered a keynote address. I took it to the minister. He agreed, and we came. So after the minister delivered a brilliant address, I don't know where the tape is at, we met with the president. And he said, when you were here in 86, you promised me you were going to open an office. What happened? So the minister went through a long explanation, and he was sending Khaled. And Khaled even got back to America and studied French. Him and his wife went and took French classes. Because if you live in Ghana, all around Ghana, to the east is, to the west is Cote d'Ivoire, to the north is Burkina Faso, to the east is Togo, all surrounded by French-speaking countries. And if you're going to work in Africa, 22 nations in Africa speak French. So you need a command of French in order to be effective on the African continent. So Khaled was taking French. Then the minister explained about him going to jail, and he had a little problem and so forth. And the minister said, however, here's Akbar. He's just getting ready to move to another country. I was going to Libya to teach the history of the civil rights movement in America in exchange for Arabic, French, and Islamic studies. We had worked the deal out, and I was going to stay there for a year in Tripoli. And he said to the president that Akbar is getting ready to go to another country in Africa, but perhaps he will come here and open the office. I didn't say, well, let me think about it, and I'm going to check. I'll get home and pray on it. I'm a soldier. I said, yes, sir, Brother Minister. And before I knew it, that was in 89, the next year I was moving to Ghana. Now I'm saying all of that to say that when you talk about the history of the nation, there's time periods in the history. 1930 to 1950, let's say, after the Honorable Elijah Muhammad came out of jail. Then you have the 50s when Malcolm came to New York. And then the period of Malcolm in New York. There's periods in the history. Minister Rodney was talking about the 25,000 names that the Savior gave out when he was in Detroit. What happened to all of those people at that time? And as the minister said the other night, that the nation has flatlined when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and it's good that you said that, because people who read the article that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was rolled up in a carpet hiding under a bed in Washington, D.C., is the same way that they described Osama bin Laden when they went in the house, if he was indeed there. Because as Kwame Ture say, white folks don't lie sometimes, they lie all the time. And so when you look at it, look at how they described it. First, there was a gunfight, and he was killed. Then the second thing, he was hiding behind his wife. Then the third thing came out, he didn't have any guns at all. Then we confiscated porno stuff and a lot of Viagra, okay? And, they have some real filthy jokes on television about that part. But look at how they pitch it. And when you read it in the press, one day you believe there was a firefight. The next day, there was no firefight. He was unarmed. The same day during the firefight, he was hiding behind one of his wives. Then the next day they changed that. So they use your brain like a ping pong and whatever they put out. So when they said this about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, now he's your leader, your strong leader of the Nation of Islam, and he was hiding from the authorities in a carpet rolled up under a bed. And so when you made that clear, this is the importance of history. But there's no one that can tell your history like you can tell it. And that's the important part. So within the Nation of Islam, everybody is not a scholar. Everybody doesn't do the intense research that's necessary, but everybody has a piece of the story. So when I was coming back and forth from Ghana, and I came to many of your cities, I had auctions, brought goods from Africa, because we didn't have a budget for the Ghana mission. And the Ghana mission was viable. I was traveling all over Africa, but you need resources. And so instead of me, the minister, scuffling to move the nation, instead of me putting the beg on them, because you can't go into Africa and set up a place, put up the mosque and say, okay, we're going to take up a public, bring Jamil up and rally some money. The brothers and sisters in Africa, when we were trying to raise some money one time, they said, Akbar, y'all need money? I said, well, you're in the wrong place. You need to go back to America because we got a monopoly on poverty here. So in other words, we don't have no money. And when you come to us, we expect you to bring something to help us to create some money because we don't have nothing. We broke. So you have to go in there a little different, setting up things, giving out some scholarships and help the people with industry so that they can earn some money. So when I was coming back and forth to do this, in my lectures in the city, and some of you will remember this, I said that each city should have a research department that would do the history of the Nation of Islam. Did you remember me saying that? The history of the Nation of Islam in that particular city. And I said it in lectures, but the Imams community, 3 of them that I know of picked up on what I said and they went to work on it. And they produced a book. Quite naturally, what they produced was slanted in their direction. And the reason we did not do it, number one, you say, I didn't check with Minister Rodney. I need to get permission. The minister said, you don't need permission to do good or to do what is right. I mean, you're going to say, Mr. Rodney, is it all right with you? I mean, you're adults. And you're doing something good. Are you doing something that's against the nation? And the second part, the reason, because you didn't know how to interact with the Imams community. Because they are the ones that laid the foundation for the nation, but you feel that there was a hate thing. They're the Imams community, we the Nation of Islam, and he destroyed the nation and we don't like him. So you couldn't interact with them, though they were your brothers and sisters. Their Aqidah may be different and they don't go for what we're doing. We don't necessarily go for some of the things they're doing. But when you come with something that you can agree upon, that the history of this nation must be written, otherwise you'll end up with a book like this. Dr. Manning's book. That's right. Now, I must say, when the minister said you should read it, when he said that, I kind of twitched because I read it. One of our ministers called me and said, Akbar, I don't know whether I should talk about this book on the rostrum because it's so bad. Because they got the FBI tapes. They got all of the phone because there's a ceiling on the time that these things cannot be released, just like the Kennedy family. And a brother told me in Guyana in 1976, I was there preparing for Imam Muhammad to come to Guyana, and a brother said to me that one day when it's released, they filmed the assassination of Malcolm X. BOSS, that's the Bureau of Special Services, mentioned heavy in this book. Right. And it's a black group that the New York Police Department developed to get into all militant groups in Harlem or around the city of New York, and the number one target was the Nation of Islam. Gene Forex, a brother that I worked with, and another brother, I can't think his name, he's a police chief in St. Croix, and he was one of our assistant secretaries. but he was working for the police department. And he was right in the, I wish I could think of his name, I just can't think, McKinley. And but he was working for the police department right within the mosque. So they have all of this information. So the brother told me, James 67, the brother that's mentioned in this book that was my lieutenant that left with Malcolm, he said to me, he said, he called me Brother Larry, he said that you wait, they're going to produce that film, and when they produce that film, there's no way that Norman and Thomas, who were two active lieutenants in the mosque, could have gotten sitting on the front row. They couldn't, number one, got in the door. Right, absolutely. They were, I mean, active lieutenants in the mosque. And then what Manning does, now this is not my subject on this book, I'm going to talk a little about it tomorrow, but it's a part of the history. And I'll tell you, I learned a lot of things that, you know, I was 18 years old when I came in the nation. And so there were things, you know, that were going up on the top that I didn't know what was happening. I knew one time, I remember Minister Benjamin says, a lot of people envious of the minister. And I tell you the truth, at 19 years old, I didn't know what he was talking about. I said, how could somebody be envious of the minister as hard as he's working, as much as we love him? I didn't even think about it twice, but he knew what I did not know about what was going on internally. Now, I'm saying this, I want to get back to this book. Number one, that if there's a research department in each city, and you may not have taken a course in writing and studied the elements of style and so forth, but you got computers today. This is the miracle of the computer. Right. I mean, you can put anything. You got speak with Dragon. What is the one you can talk into and it type? Dragon. I can't think of the Dragon Speak. You can talk into it. It picks up your voice, and then the computer will even help you if you don't have subject and verb agreement. The computer will help you with your grammar and say that's wrong, stupid. Change that paragraph, and here's the way it should read. Okay, the computer can help you. All you have to do is talk it and have the idea. But if you interview people, and we're fast leaving you. You know, next week I'll be 69 years old, so I'm a year away from 70 years old. And so we're leaving you, and what we have between these two ears are here, and this is the importance of oral history. If I learned anything from Dr. Manning Marable, is the importance of oral history in the black community. And the Nation of Islam, 80 years in America, has one of the richest histories you can find anywhere. It has influenced millions of people. As you said, Askia, in the arts and culture. You know, if you read a book by Waiting for the Midnight Sun, his name is Joseph Pennell at Columbia. If you get his book in there, he clearly says that the root of all of the liberation struggle in America is rooted in the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, by what he brought to us, produced consciousness among our people. Right. So if each city, at the time that you were the manager of the editor of the Muhammad Speaks, how many mosques were listed? Was it 95? 95 mosques. They existed at the time of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Now we have 163 mosques and study groups across America. But in each one of those cities, there were followers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And now they're buried, they're away from it. Many of them have internalized what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught them, and they use it in their everyday life. And unless you question them close, they would never reveal that I was once in the Nation of Islam. To many of our people, men and women, this is like basic training. Right. They come in because you don't keep them. We got a revolving door. The minister described it right the other night. When they get in there, they get into this stuff that we got going. And a lot of the stuff that we got going comes because we don't know how to manage the lives of people who just put our lives in their hand. So we got internal dynamics that you may not see on the outside world. So a man or a woman comes in, they get trained well. Then they begin to grow and develop. And maybe the one who is in charge of them don't have the intellectual capacity, don't have the know-how of how to deal with them. That's right. Because they're smart. Some people say, I don't like to be the smartest guy in the room, but that room I just came out, everybody in there is stupid. Okay, so he may not want that, but he realized that there's no thinkers in that room. And because he's able to think, then he's ostracized, he's beat up. The minister gave a prime example on that roster. Right. Here's a man that's a pilot for a 767. and plus got an engineering degree, a master's degree in engineering. Here's the other two brothers. So these brothers, and then the minister, I mean, he was easy with us. He said, now, some of us think because I'm in charge, I'm the minister, I'm the captain, I'm the lieutenant, I'm the secretary. Brother, I don't care what you know. I don't care what plane you flying. Pick up that bundle of papers. See? And then you reach back and get there should be no invidious distinctions among the believers. You just an ordinary believer. I learned my lesson in St. Louis the hard way. We got a lawyer, the only lawyer we got in the mosque. And my captain had him, we were meeting with some judges and professional people, and my captain put him on the door to check. The minister said, brother, he said, you can't find, that's a lawyer. His peers are coming in here. And when his peers come in there judging, the judge is putting his hand up, and here's the lawyer in the court checking. I mean, that's all we could find to do in it. I mean, and he engaged my brain. So I'm saying that, let me go back to the point. In every city, you can begin to catalog that history. And what does it mean? Could you ask Brother Howard to bring me one of those Sankofa birds? Okay. So I want to show you this because on television in Guyana, where I got in trouble, I was talking to young people, and I was doing a television show 2 days before they arrested me, and I used the Sankofa bird. Because if you're a teacher and you got a classroom, it's difficult sometimes to get young students interested in history because, number one, in America, we usually don't see ourselves in history. I'm sorry, last night in Atlanta, I had a big, nice Sankofa bird, and the brother in the middle of my lecture stood up and raised his hand. He said, I want to buy that. And so he gave me an offer I couldn't refuse, so I had to sell it to him, okay? So he got my juices going. I was about to do an auction right in the middle of my lecture and say, this is a commercial interest. He offered me $200. Anybody got $250? But I just took the $200. Now, this is a Sankofa bird, if you can see it. And it comes from Ghana, the Akans. They call these Adinkra signs. And this became very popular by Haile Garima, who started a picture in Jamaica called Nunu. And he wanted to finish it in the slave dungeons in Cape Coast in Ghana, and he came there to shoot the rest of it. Haile Garima is married to an African-American sister. He's from Ethiopia. Is he still over the department at Howard? He's still there. And if you need to get a copy of Sankofa, it's an excellent picture. And don't get it because I'm in it, but just get it because the picture is good, okay? So he learned about this. And he changed the name of his picture from Nunu to Sankofa. And what it means is that in order to go forward in life, you must know your roots. You must know the origins of where you came from. That stabilizes you. And what happens in the nation, we don't know enough of our own history. So if you produce this book, when a brother comes in to say the Camden Mosque, I can't remember in the old days, I think this was 44. What was it? 20. Oh, 20. Thank you very much. Camden was 20. We had a minister named George. George, he was George X. I can't remember his name, but he ended up going up to Boston. But he was here as the minister. And so if you come into the Camden Mosque 20, and in the orientation class, a brother presents you with a book of the history of how this mosque was started. Minister Jeremiah came over from Philly, and Malcolm came because Malcolm was organized in this area. I read a letter when Malcolm was over Philadelphia, and he was writing a letter to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that I had was able to see, and I thank Allah. And Malcolm was saying, well, tonight we took up $224. He named how many people were out at the meeting, and Malcolm organized the mosque between Camden and Philadelphia. He got it started. So the point about this, you got to know your origin, your roots. And don't let outside people describe what you are. If you don't write your history, somebody else will. And there has to be a body of literature that is produced from the nation. Your own experience. A sister in Mississippi wrote a book called Mary's Story, I think it was called. But it was saying, and every one of you have a story. how you first heard of Islam, brothers, whether you heard it in jail, whether a brother stopped you on the street and you wanted to punch him in his mouth, and he was trying to get you one of those Muhammad speaks. And finally, he brought you to the mosque and you heard and you became conscious. It woke you up. Our language is resurrection. But really, the language today is consciousness, making you conscious. Look at Minister Farrakhan. He goes to these huge venues. And because of what God has blessed him with in terms of his delivery, he talks to thousands and millions of people. But at one of these big venues, you ever seen the minister say, I want everybody who wants to accept and become a follower of the Nation of Islam line up on that wall over there? So he doesn't say it. But he's building consciousness. When they leave there, what he put on their mind, they think about it. They turn it over. And they really want more. And that's how he drives them to the mosque, because now they're thirsty, they're hungry, because they're becoming conscious. So we must know our roots. I was in Australia. Now, most of you know that I've been to 141 countries in the world. That's a lot of countries. I don't know if Jesse Jackson got a record on me. But I was in Australia, and they were going over the history of the Aborigines. And in the Aborigines, they have a thing called dream time. And it was 50,000 years ago when there was peace on the planet, and they went through this whole thing. And I'm sitting there and I'm putting it together with the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Then I go over to New Zealand, which is across the ocean from Australia. And so I'm doing a radio show, and a man calls in, and he said that your movement, the Nation of Islam, started from one of the Maoris here from New Zealand. I said, is that right? He said, yes, and if you tell me where I can meet you, I'll bring you the proof. There's a group in New Zealand called the Ratnas. And this Ratna group have the Star and Crescent on their ring. And then he brought me a picture of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the one he had this fez on with a Star and Crescent. And he said, see, your leader has our sign on. And the man who started your movement was a Maori or Ratna who came from here. I said, that's interesting. But I knew it was not that. But I knew that the Savior had taught in the South Pacific and maybe other places. So I said, your leader, Ratner, did he ever go to the Middle East? But he traveled all over the world. And when you look at it, it's a most fascinating history. Their flag, the crescent, is faced the same way. They build their meeting halls with something that looks like minarets. The movement, and they called it a nationalist movement at that time, the movement has been broken up now, but there's still Ratners there who still have the Star and Crescent. And they showed me their book. In their early book, they changed the flag, but the flag was a Star and Crescent. And I said to them, it's obvious that Ratner was influenced by Islam, and maybe he didn't want to call it Islam, such as Marcus Garvey was influenced by Islam. And the spiritual base that Marcus Garvey built was the influence of Deuce Muhammad, that's his name, right, on Marcus Garvey, and when he was working in a printing shop in England. But when Marcus Garvey built the movement, he didn't build it as an Islamic movement, or as we would say, the Nation of Islam. So I'm only saying that you must know your roots. So you got to write your history. You got to be able now to begin to write. Otherwise, when we leave here, somebody else will write and describe it. Manning Marble, now a whole lot of people are mad at him. But in order to have an intellectual conversation about this book, you've got to first read it. You can't just read a book review. You can't just open the book and read a few pages. You got to read it. If you're not interested in reading it, then say, I don't know what the book says because I have not read it. But don't try to, I listen to all of these people who are condemning and throwing stones at him. He did what Spike Lee said when he met with the minister. He said, every one of us have our view of Malcolm. And I'm putting on the screen my view of him. And even though Spike Lee, once you read this book, you see that Malcolm's involvement in Africa and what he did in Africa, and I was impressed because I lived in Africa for 12 years. And Spike Lee didn't mention, the only time he showed Malcolm in Africa was on a camel as a tourist in Egypt. But when you read this book, you say, my God, Malcolm traveled throughout Africa like that? I had a big argument with a brother that Malcolm spent his last birthday, his 39th birthday, in Africa. And the brother said, no, he spent it in Harlem. He was at Jose's house. And when I read this book, he only verified he was in Casablanca. He left Casablanca and went to Algeria, and that's where he spent his 39th birthday. So I'm saying most of you who are in this audience, and we have some who are not followers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the thing I want to say about history, you have to be true to history. Thank you. And by the way, we have some of these on the table in the back, okay? You have to be true to history, and being true to history, and I want to use this as an example. Now, you know, the intention is good, but it's like me trying to make out Malcolm didn't exist. Malcolm existed. He's a reality. I came in the nation under him. I was sitting over there making a note, and I remember in our first ministry class, Malcolm said, when you're sitting on the rostrum and you're getting ready to speak and somebody's introducing you, don't sit there and make notes. And Malcolm's thing was because it sends a signal to the audience that you're really not prepared, and you didn't have your subject laid out, and so you're taking off from what the speaker's making to make your point. He said, don't do that. He said, if you can't retain it, don't sit there in front of the people and write notes. I mean, a lot of good things in that ministry class, and there was only 5 of us in that class that he taught us that remains with me to this very day. Now, when I look at this right here, the Savior, who started the Nation of Islam in Detroit, and he stayed there until 1934. And when he left, he turned it over to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, okay? And when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad left us, who came into power? Amen. Okay, so how could you make out, see, so in doing history, because we got a slant, we want history, we can't be like the Jews. They make history the way they want history. And they told Minister Farrakhan at that table, if we can get you to do a series of things, don't think, Farrakhan, this is a love feast. And they wanted the minister to do what they wanted to do so that they could write the history of him the way they wanted. You remember this conversation the minister shared with us? So when we do this, the reality, because you say that Imam Muhammad, I don't like him, he did this, and he wasn't with his father, and all of that, but he's a reality of history. So you can't just, you know, you got a picture of him down here, but when he came to power, we all tried to hang with him. We were with him. The minister was with him. The minister tried to help him. So he was the leader of the nation at that time. And as the minister has said many times, that Allah willed what he did. It was in Allah's hand. And he was necessary for what we have built today. And that's what the minister said. So when we do history, we can't wipe it out. Just like you got the Clarence 13X here. Now, I soldiered with him. And I know the set of problems that he had personally, but he produced the 5 percenters. And many of those 5 percenters are in the nation in leadership position today. So I could say, well, I don't even want to talk about Clarence. Let me wipe Clarence out, okay? No, you can't wipe him out because he's a reality. Because when you talk about 2 things, those have had the greatest impact. You may disagree with Muhammad Ali today, but Muhammad Ali had an impact on the Nation of Islam from the time that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad gave him that name. Because when you read the book, it says that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who was not in the sport and play and boxing, but the impact of him, and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad accepted him, and that impact helped the nation. I mean, even with the money that we got from Gaddafi, the first $3 million for the mosque in Chicago, it was Gaddafi looking at the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Muhammad Ali. And he loved Muhammad Ali, and that door was opened by the popularity of Muhammad Ali that helped us in the Nation of Islam. So when we do this, we got to be real and true to history. It's like people who don't want to talk about Khalid, because Khalid went against his leader, the minister, in his final days. But when Khalid was working for the nation, Khalid did good in the nation. So when you write the history of the nation, what do? I ain't even going to mention him. I'm going to write him out. Then you're not being true to history. You're just like the Jews. Try to write people out. And I'm going to give you an example before I close this out. I was in Guyana with this current problem that I'm going to talk about tomorrow. And I went to a school to teach young people at a school. And I went to the blackboard, and I put 2 names on the blackboard, Ivan Van Sertima and Forbes Burnham. 1 student knew who Ivan Van Sertima was. Okay, 1. Burnham, a few raised their hand. Now, he was the first president of Guyana that put Guyana on the map. Now, there are people in America that have differences with him because there's a man named Walter Rodney that they think that Burnham had something to do with the killing of Walter Rodney. A bomb exploded at a public gathering and he was killed because they had an internal problem with each other. So, but the students in the school under this current administration in Guyana which is Indian-dominated, are trying to write Burnham and some of the black giants of Guyana out of history, and they start with the children. So the children grow up. When I got off that plane, now I haven't been there since 2003. When I got off that plane and saw that the airport was named Chetty Jagan. Chetty Jagan, you know who that is. He is the Indian prime minister that came in after Burnham died, and there was a man named Holt who came in for a little while, and then the Indians were voted in. I couldn't get that signal back there. Okay. I have to close out. I got 2 radio shows to do. But I want to take questions. So what I'm saying, as we go through the history of the Nation of Islam, there's a lot of little details and things that we can talk about, but each one of you have a story. And if you could write your story, most of them would become bestsellers. And the way you get into a story, now I'm into this book because what's in here, I lived most of it. From the time that I came in the nation in 1960, I lived through it, I watched it. I knew what it was to have our mosque burned down that Monday night on February the 22nd, 1965. I knew what it was when Malcolm declared on March 8, 1964, he was separating from the nation, but he still believed in the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I went through the episode with his house being firebombed, and then the day that he was assassinated and the Nation of Islam caught the blame from it, and how we had to build our credibility. We lived through that. So when we read the book, it's a different kind of interest. So when you do the book on Camden or Philadelphia, as my brother Reuben, and I didn't know this was Reuben that helped. Where's Brother Reuben? Is he outside? Have Reuben to come in here. I didn't know that there's a brother that has helped Minister Farrakhan since 1972, and that's Kenny Gamble, Luke Bond. That's right. I mean, now I didn't know this was the same Reuben, and as soon as he said we worked together on the album, I looked at it, I said, Reuben? But Reuben took the time to write a history. Now, there's things in here you may disagree with, because if you tell me that every book you read except the Holy Quran, you agree with everything in it, then you got a problem. Okay, if you read a book, there's things that you're not going to agree with. And you can't be so gullible because somebody writes something, you just agree with everything in it. There may be things in here that you disagree with. Jeremiah's interview and how Jeremiah viewed Minister Farrakhan. And I mean, I could walk through that because I know we were in New York and there was always a rivalry between Philly and New York. And New York, I mean, we were just out front. We were, as the messenger told the minister, you like a bird in flight, okay? And Philly wanted to show that we can do that too. And so, and Philly had a little thing, by any means necessary. Okay, so Philly was a little different kind of. But my point is that Brother Reuben sat down and took the time to produce a body of literature. And I'm encouraging each one of you. Sister Barbara, you got an unbelievable story. Okay, and people, and so, you know, well, he's writing a book, I don't need to write a book. Look, everybody needs to write a book. Look how many biographies there are on Hitler, you know? And let me close out on this. And I promise you I'm going to close out because I got to go. I want to take a few questions. There's an entertainer. I think he helped us that name. He said, well, that's my name. My name is James Jones, and I call myself Jim Jones. I said, but what about if a rapper came up and said, my name is Adolf Hitler? I said, Jim Jones killed 969 people in Guyana, and most of them were black people from San Francisco. He said clearly that he studied Father Divine to build his movement, but he didn't say out in public that he studied the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And Askia, you know how the movement was modeled. Imam came in, had a relationship with him. I used to help him set up his meetings in Chicago. We had these spiritual jubilees with him. But he was a nut, so that name has a certain stigma, and this happened 30 years ago. So a young brother who does not know history, has no clue to history, he gets out there with a name. So older people say, Jim Jones. They say, how could he take a name like that after this white man who had these people commit what he called revolutionary suicide? So this is the, that's drink the Kool-Aid. You ever, that's where that term came from, was Jim Jones in the jungles of Guyana. Thank you, may Allah bless you. Assalamu alaikum. I just want to do a couple of commercial breaks. You know, there's a lot of pictures floating around, and I thank Allah for a brother like Carlos. But I just want to say this, the difference with me and pictures, all of these pictures, Carlos, he came to my house, and man, he thought he had died and went to heaven when he went through my pictures. And so I gave him a lot of pictures to put on his album, and he made a good point. He said, Akbar, you could sell these pictures in the original, and it's gone, and one person got it. But these should be shared with the whole community. So he convinced me to take my originals. He took them, and he made copies, okay? Okay, I got to...
Go ahead, go right into your question and answer.
Okay, hold this a second. So when you see these pictures, and my pictures are everywhere now, but the difference is I can tell you the date and who's on the picture, okay? I can say this is December 1974 in Jamaica, and on the picture is brother who was our minister under the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, his name is Omar now, Minister Farrakhan, Muhammad Ali, and Raymond Sharp. And I can tell you that. If you look at this picture right here, you see on the picture Naim Akbar, Imam Muhammad, and Akbar Muhammad. This was in the country of Barbados when we opened our mosque there. If you get this picture right here, I can tell you this is the first part of December, around December the 7th, at the Muhammad Ali Day we had in New York, and on the picture is the assistant to Mayor Lindsay, Neil Walsh, who was the Commissioner of Sports, Muhammad Ali, Minister Farrakhan with the sunglasses in back, Walter Youngblood, who worked in Ali's camp, and Ali's brother Rahman. I can tell you that's the difference. This is Sonia Sanchez, Brother James. Thank you for your beautiful delivery. This is Sonia. She was Sonia 5X. And how it happened was, and this is when she was in the mosque, somebody purchased the picture today of her in my bookstore. Who bought it? Okay, he got a picture of her in my bookstore where she was signing her book. She said, she wrote a poem called I'm Talking About the Nation of Islam. Okay, and this is Imam Muhammad when he went to Pakistan and he was making a prayer at one of the Muslim saints' grave. Morani and Mangu, Sonia Sanchez's two boys, I told Sonia that I had the picture that we took when the two boys were young. They're grown men, they're in their 40s now, and they live in Philadelphia. This is a picture, Askia would appreciate this. Abbas Rasul came to New York, because New York, we were always under the spotlight. So you have Clarence 7X who became Hussein Shabazz and Abbas Rasul in front of our mosque. And I can tell you the dates and so forth. So that's the difference if you get a picture from Akbar. They're on the table in the back, okay? Oh, they can't? Okay. They're on the table in the back. But I want to thank you. Now I'm going to have a time, I think Now let me say this to you. And I want to say this. Spend your time doing good. I went to Jamil Al-Amin, Rap Brown's mosque, yesterday in Atlanta, and they treated me very well. I prayed Jumu'ah with them, and then they got up and had me to speak to the whole congregation. I was going to go to the Atlanta masjid, but Jamil Al-Amin's wife, Karima Al-Amin, who's an attorney, called me and invited me, said the imam would like you to come and explain to the brothers and sisters. I was going to the Atlanta masjid because they have about 1,000 people praying on Friday, and most of them grew up in New York with me. So I was going to go there, but I accepted that invitation because they wanted me to come. The other one, I would have to go and ask them, can I come? And I gave out letters, and I'm going to try to have some before you break up today where you can write to the president of Guyana and help me. But I want to mention this. If Allah blesses you with a radio show, I have a radio show, I have a lot of listeners in Ghana and West Africa, do good. If you're blessed with a TV show, do good. Allah, I can get on there and criticize a whole lot of people within our community, but I need to criticize the enemy that has oppressed our people instead of throwing dots, them Sunni Muslims, they're Salafis and they got to wear their jalabiyas 10 inches above, they're splitting hairs over what hadith we read. Or I'm in the Nation of Islam, but I don't like Louis Farrakhan, I'm an original Nation of Islam. And you on airways doing that when you can be teaching people and bringing them to the call of Islam trying to clean up this mess that white folks have made. So you spend your time, and the white folks love it. They love it. They say, look at them. Here's an Ahmadiyya Muslim, here's a Salafi, here's a Sunni Muslim, here's a Shiite Muslim, here's a Nation of Islam, they're Moorish science. And all of us arguing with each other, and we ain't got a doggone thing. I'd like to use another word. So if you're going to do something, do good. Look at the crack problem. Look at the dysfunctional family. Look at the 2.4 million people in the jails of America. Look at the unemployment, home foreclosures, how cars being repossessed and homes being taken in our community? Have we set up and say, well, let's get together with the other communities and see how we can help them? Look how many young black men are being raised by mothers, and you got all of this supreme wisdom. How many mentoring programs do you have to help the young brothers? Setting up programs in the community, but no, we arguing with each other about who you believe. I don't like him. I remember in the old days he did that. That is madness. And your enemy is laughing at you. So we need to find a way to do what we agree upon, and that we can agree with one another. And if you're on the airways, if you got a newspaper, I don't care what newspaper it is, talk about things that will be helpful to the community, because that's where we started at. Thank you. I want to take these few questions, okay? Any questions? Yes, Sister Barber.
Can you take the mic to me?
I have a comment. You know, literally, this morning about 4:07, I was speaking with Brother Lamont, who has been my lifelong friend from Chester, and we were talking about not leaving out any part of the history, because then it's not the history.
Right.
And we were talking about the rebirth of the Nation of Islam. And you're right, Brother Minister Akbar. Allah did bless me to make a significant impact in that part of Brother Minister Farrakhan's history, and I need to talk about it or write about it. Thank you.
Right. That's absolutely. Thank you very much. Any other questions? I'm going to take, I have to go and do no other questions. I want to thank you very much. And Brother Rodney, could you tell me about the schedule later on? I got to do 2 radio shows, and what time am I expected back? Or just
Today, you got 2 shows today.
Yes.
So Jihad's you're gonna go to the station.
Yeah, I think. It's not far, is it?
No, it's not really far.
Okay. This is a Muslim brother from another community that wants me on this show, and then I got to do the show in California. So
we basically, you be on for tomorrow.
okay. So inshallah, please come to the mosque and do it like we did in old days. Bring someone with you, okay? I mean, I know you come to the mosque, sometimes we got so much baggage, we just bring ourselves. But we were taught, as we grew up, that when we got up in the morning, we were going to the mosque, who can I get? I mean, Shah was a master. Shah was a master because he made you feel bad if you came. He said, brother, you came alone? He said, 1 million people out there in the city and you can't find one person? Say, yes, sir. But, well, go downstairs and see if you can get somebody. So you go downstairs, you got your bubble gum, you say, brother, you got alcohol on your breath, here, chew this gum, okay? And say, okay, go wash your hands or something. Come on, I want to take you upstairs. And we would bring them in there and pack them in the mosque. And we may not get all of them, but if we got 10, if we got 5, and that's how we built the mosque. And if they leave you next week, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said to us, my duty is only to deliver a clear message. Okay, whether you join the FOI, the MGT, that's your business. But I guarantee you, when they get through you at that mosque, you become a conscious black man or a conscious black woman. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
All right, thank you, sir.
All right, let's give a big hand. Minister Abdul Akbar Muhammad. All praises due to Allah. All praises due to Allah. We're breaking for 30 minutes. There's some food. It doesn't cost you anything right across the hall, and we're going to reconvene and get ready to hear from Brother Askia Muhammad. So this is the intermission time, all right? And you're free to go over there. There's refreshments there for you, a little light food and everything. When we reconvene, we'll let you know about the dinner tonight. For those that may want to get a ticket to the dinner tonight over at the mosque, some of you already have it in your registration package, okay? But we have 2 more presenters, so let's get ready. Don't forget that the last night's session, a very powerful session, the history of the Nation of Islam in Philadelphia, those DVDs are on sale right now. You can get those DVDs at the table. Minister Abdul Rahman's book is there at the table. Also the book Top of the Clock. Anyone that was here last night, you'll know how the name Top of the Clock came into being. Through the great efforts of those working with Minister Jeremiah Shabazz as they rival with New York City. All right, we'll be back in about 30 minutes to get ready for the last part of the session.